Today on Waking Up in America, we continue our discussion with Lew Ross, creator of Fickle Boards. We shift gears to his early life as a sensitive young misfit searching for love in a world driven by power and influence. I'm Tai Chi. At 19, I was a superstar and I was lost inside. I left it all behind, switched continents, and started all over. Years later, I found myself lost again, this time in the American dream. This is a story about awakening, about living the life you were created for, about going inward and discovering the joyous and purposeful person you and I are both meant to be. This is Waking Up in America. When you were young and you came into the skateboard culture, you said you didn't do drugs. You didn't.
Yeah, no, I was straight edge because straight edge just got invented when I was like 14. You know, Youth of Today and the New York hardcore scene hit, and I went straight edge. I was also in martial arts. When I started skateboarding at 12, I also started in martial arts, which is another independent, you know, you're competing with yourself. It's really about improving and developing yourself. Skateboarding is about self-development. And
yes,
even team skateboarding still is individual journey. So I've always gravitated toward those things, you know.
Right, I understand, because you have to practice one thing over and over and over again to get really, really good.
And
so
only
it's
you
focus,
can,
and
only you can do it.
And it's your practice, so it's very much like the martial arts.
It's not a team sport.
So when was your shift?
Oh well, I mean, okay, so martial arts and skateboarding were a big part of how I began to find my way in the world. You know, 12-year-old kid. You know, sensitive, socially maladjusted, pretty badly bullied. I got bullied pretty savagely. So many people have that story, and I got into a really dark place. I mean, do we want to talk about that?
Yeah,
it got really gnarly. I got really gnarly because the world is extremely unwelcoming toward organisms like me, like people who are sensitive and idealistic really get the business in the world. This world's, I mean, there's plenty of movies about it. It's on the internet.
Yes, and it's a very universal story.
I mean, it's universal. There's nothing rare about being a misfit because you just aren't what everyone else is trying to be.
There you go.
Yeah, and that was me to a T. And I didn't think that up or invent that. That just happened to me. And I found my personal context in a spiritual experience that centered around the person of Jesus. Man, I became a radical Jesus kid at about 17. I was just about to turn 17.
And this was coming out of that
dark. Things got really
dark.
Yeah, it got really bad because you know, even if you think about it, really, if you take the snap from 8 or 12 years old, you know, being socially maladjusted and when I say that, I just mean really being an anxious kid, really being a sensitive kid, and really understanding that the world around me was filled with bullying influences.
So if you're okay with talking about it, sharing,
yeah.
it didn't come out through drugs or through, where did it come through?
What happened is, you know, at 12 I was really bullied savagely, and you know the story where the kid gets really savagely bullied and then he chokes the crap out of his bully. So at about 11 or 12 years old, I choked the crap out of my bully, my poor bully, and I have feelings today about that process, and I at 12 concluded that the development of personal power was the way to go. I didn't really know. I mean, I was a kid and I was young. You're 15 years old or 13 years old, and you're trying to take power over your life, and you're trying to get some control over this really bad situation all the time. You know, being sensitive. Realizing how just amazingly impactful it is for people to be super negative to each other, and all this fear and negativity and inferiority flying around all the time. And I could never stomach a bully. You know, having been bullied, I never could stomach when someone was picking on other people. I mean, I got my butt kicked so many times, and went on the martial arts journey. What happened was I let anger be like my personal power. You know, if I was a 12-step approach, the 12-step approach for me was that anger and rage were my personal higher power, and I picked them. I actually took some 12-step language as a kid and said, then anger and rage will be my personal power, my higher power, because rage, you know, like want to cut through all this negativity, and a lot of that New York hardcore it was positive punk, but it was extremely aggressive. And that stuff became my way. And what happened with me is that all that anger, like, it wore me out.
Yeah.
And I started to just,
Well, especially if you're the sensitive.
I was a kid. Yeah, I was a sensitive person, and I was young, and I didn't have perspective, and I began to wear out. And the more I trained in martial arts and the more intense I got, the more I started unraveling. I started self-harming. Self-harming became a real way for me to take control and to take control of the moment and to cause a sense of relief in the moment. Very drug-like, very addictive, and very impactful to my life. Self-harming, I was extremely disillusioned with the things people do to relax. I hated, for me, drugs always seemed like just they were a postponement
Yeah.
and things only got worse while you were feeling better about them. And I rejected drugs as an option early on, knowing that once I start taking them, I'll never want to stop. I'll die in the gutter, and I'm not sure I want to go out like that.
And it's not a solution. Yeah.
And anger was powerful, and it had a lot of perks. And I had a lot of perks because I was very strong in anger and good in martial arts. And I got a little crazy. I shaved my head back before people really shaved their heads a lot. It was the first skinhead movement that I know of that wasn't neo-Nazi. It wasn't white power. It was just power. And I was very into that with the straight edge movement. I was not high in the movement. I wasn't recognized. I was a kid. I was a little brother of the people who were really doing it. But I started to rattle apart. I got to 16 years old, and I realized that, like, I'm losing it. I had a couple of these weird fits. They were obviously anxiety-based fits, and very strong spiritual cries for help. And my friends began to back away from me because I was getting so crazy. And because of my interest in martial arts, I really had a Taoist kind of philosophy. Every kid is a syncretist. Kids just kind of pick and choose their ideas, and that's great.
Yes.
I think it's great.
And if we allow them, they'll find the way.
Yeah. Well, if they question authority, they might find some reliable authority.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I was looking at Taoism, and I had a lot of friends who were Hindu and Taoist and Eastern thought and philosophy, and they were wonderful to talk to. I really enjoyed talking to them and listening to them, and they had a huge impact on me because they were willing to discuss ideas. And some of the folks, my family was nominally and just a little bit involved in church stuff, and it disgusted me because there was not really a capacity to discuss ideas. They had sort of pat answers to things that were totally unsatisfying to me, and they weren't. It wasn't working for me at all. It seemed like a sham. So to tell you the story, I went to this pastor of a church we'd attended, and I said, what's the deal? What's it all about, Alfie? And he said, I'll give you the reasons. Here's number one. You want to be in the Christian church because it's the glue that holds society together. Who wants to be glue? When you want me to be glue? This isn't Maoist.
Yeah.
I don't have a Maoist background where I want to be part of the collective.
Right.
I'm not Soviet. I don't want to be part of a collective. I'm an American. I know the value of individual identity and expression. I don't want to be your glue, bro. Take your glue away from me. So that was really hard for me.
And you're already like you said, you're trying to find your place, and you're not being recognized for who you are. Your sensitivity. Yes, I understand.
His second reason was many people have become very rich by following the teachings of the Bible. And I almost flipped the table, not realizing how much like Jesus I would have been being in that moment if I had flipped the table.
Well, maybe he meant like spiritually
nope,
rich or something.
he meant money. He meant money. He started talking about Rockefellers and people like that. It was crazy. Yeah. And then the last reason,
be communist,
the last reason really hooked me. He holds up the Bible and he says, in this book are the answers to every question you will ever ask. And if you only know how to formulate your approach to it so you can divine the answers, you will never lack for guidance in your decisions. Now that sounded great. It sounded like power to me. He framed it in power. And I was like, okay. So much of the Christianity around me was all about accruing and gaining power and influence, but it disgusted me because it was totally insincere. So, but that Bible thing he said got me, and I took my Bible home and I said, well, that's a power I could dig. They opened it to Matthew, and I started reading. They got to Matthew chapter 5, and I'm an angry punk rocker looking for spiritual power. I'm in dialogue with Taoists and Hindus and Confucianists. I have a more Eastern approach to life. Even the straight edge movement was Sun Myung Moon, Unification Church based. You know, it was all Eastern. And I approached the Bible from this Eastern, and I'm looking in it, and Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 and 6, he teaches me that if I have an intention in my heart, that it's as real as a reality of action. If you are angry at someone, you may as well have killed them. And I read these words of Jesus at probably 15 years old, and I said, well, I'm a bad person. I'm really bad. I'm really angry and really violent, and that's who I am. And I closed the Bible, put it away, and I went on a journey of admission that I was an angry, wicked person. And I was abusive toward my body, toward others. From that age, and I guess 2 or 3 years, I just was wild and abusive. And I traveled pretty much every dark path as a young kid with this kind of philosophical nihilism that the only reality in all of life is that we're dead at the end of it. It's the only equalizing factor.
Yeah.
And I during that time, I wrote it in my journal. I was 15 years old, and I wrote, beauty is the greatest deception of all. It makes you want what you cannot keep. And I was extremely ugly. I valued decay and death very highly, like religiously, and became a very, very dark, evil person for a short time. And then I just got whiplashed around. I started to shatter. I started to fall apart. It was too much for me. All this negativity and all this decay and all this very sincere punk rock and nihilistic engagement, I started to fall apart.
You said it was exhausting you.
I was exhausted. I was wearing thin. It was like some like Bilbo in the Ring, Gollum thing happening to me, where I was getting changed by all this negativity. Right. It was crushing me. Right. And I began to cry out to God and say, God, I read some of your book, and it taught me I'm bad. You must care about us. I hadn't read any more. That was all I'd read. And I said, God, you must be out there. You must be in these avatars of the Hindu faith. You must be in the wisdom of the Buddha. You must be in the teaching of the Tao. You must be somewhere. You must be reaching out to us, because I can feel it. You must understand if you made us. You know, I was a believer. I always was a believer.
It's amazing. You know, you will look at kids who are overcome with anger and who are into cutting or
I see my little brothers and sisters.
You see them, and we have no idea that this is what's going on in them. They're searching.
I do.
They're longing for.
It drives me nuts.
You do, because you've been there. But
those guys don't have like anybody.
Exactly, but you don't even have. You've never learned you've never been given a channel to even show up, to talk, to speak, to be heard, because of the sensitivity. Because of.
You know, when I later on became a Christian, and there was a pretty quick period during which I was exposed to the teachings of Leo Buscaglia. Do you know who he is?
Oh, absolutely.
You do?
He was
nobody knows that guy.
My beginnings as well.
So I watched a talk by Leo Buscaglia, and my mom and I kind of touched on that, and I just began to weep. I remember I was weeping uncontrollably, and I left the room because I hated my parents, and I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to have any feelings, and it was like 1 week I saw Leo Buscaglia speak on TV, and it busted me. I called my Hindu friend up that night, and I said, there has to be a God. And I discovered it. God has to be love.
Yeah.
When I watched Leo Buscaglia, I said, if there's God, then his fundamental nature must be love. And my Hindu friend loved it, because he was struggling with Hinduism as a second generation. He was a son of an immigrant, and Hinduism was just superficial, and he wanted the spiritual experience of God. So he and I were on the journey together, and then I said, if there's a God, his fundamental nature must be love. If his fundamental nature is love, we must be able to find him by following the breadcrumbs to him of love. So I began to, and then the next week I went on a thing with my school, big peer leadership seminar, totally not a religious thing, but deeply spiritual. And I had a transcendent experience with love there because I saw the universality of everyone's need for love once again, very strongly. So it's like here you got this nihilistic punk rock kid, super, super high philosophical anger, wearing out, losing my sanity, self-destructive, and I encounter Leo Buscaglia one week, go on a peer leadership weekend the next week, and then the third week I go on an Emmaus walk, Tres Dias Cursillo Dealio thing, and get introduced to the fuller teaching about who Jesus was. And I found in Jesus everything I'd been groping around for in the Tao, everything that I'd been wondering about in the different avatars and things like that. I found in one place with Jesus. And I couldn't believe people weren't talking about it all the time. So they didn't talk about that in church. I've been to church before, and they didn't talk about Jesus like this. I mean, it was sick. I was blown away. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be the worst Christian you've ever had, but I'm going to be yours. Because I heard he takes those. Because they were talking about how even Nicodemus, the religious expert, Jesus was like, nah, that's not what it's about, buddy. It's about this being spiritually renewed by me. And I thought, well, I want to be spiritually renewed. I need a spiritual life infusion, yeah. So I went to Jesus and I just kept coming back to him, and I haven't stopped. I'm 41 now. I was 16 then. So whatever the math is, that's how many years I've been like looking. And that's fed. The funny thing is that all of the groping around I was doing in the dark, and all of the looking for the way forward has been, in a way, Jesus has made it worse and better. Being exposed to acceptance and love at a baseline level has caused me to sort of file a divorce with this world and its dumb fashion rules and its dumb conformity and its, oh, well, you have to wear this or wear that or look like this or look like that. You have to be cool, or you have to be thin, or you have to be beautiful, or you have to be gay or straight or black or white, or all these, all the Bob Marley ism, schism, all that stuff is just done for me. I'm done with it. So when I'm out riding my skateboard and I'm just having so much fun now, there's a certain freedom I enjoy because certain issues are just settled. But there's a certain trouble I cause because I also don't care about certain things people value greatly. I don't care about conformity. And when conformity is the subculture's greatest dynamic, skateboarding right now.
Yeah.
Your kids don't want to skateboard. The reason your kids don't want to skateboard is because they're happy. And skateboarders aren't happy. Look at them, they're throwing their board because they can't do the trick. And if they don't do the trick, they lose their place in the culture. Mm-hmm. If they lose their place in the culture and the community because they can't do the trick, they're under a lot of pressure, so they throw and your kids are too smart to do that. Your kids are already happy people. Why become miserable?
But you're changing that culture.
Working
you're
on it,
changing, yeah.
If I can survive.
Because I actually watched some YouTube that a guy said, look, skateboarding is really great. This is why you should skate. One of the things, it's healthy, it's fun, and it's safe.
Okay.
Wait. Safe? Did you say safe?
Yeah, no,
I
it's not
understand healthy.
safe. That's not safe.
It's not safe.
You need 12 good men. You can only find 11. There are 6 young lives still waiting for number 7. I may be living on earth, but I'm living for heaven. Man with a woman, like a lizard on a rock. Man with a woman, like a lizard on a rock. I don't say I understand it. That's the way Solomon used to talk. I got my black leather jacket, the one I wore through all my youth. I got my black sunglasses. I feel just like William Booth. Hey, don't ask me nothing about nothing. Maybe I just might tell you the truth.
So we've talked how, you know, it's so easy to not feel like we're not fitting in, or we get into a situation where something happens to us when we're really little, and or teenage years, or whenever, when we're forming this idea of who we are. And then there's two ways to go: destruction, or this indifference, or just delaying this question, who am I and how do I show up in the world? Because if we show up in the world as who we're not, if we're living somebody else's dream, we can't really live the purpose that we're created for and make the change in our world. Thank you, Lew, so much for sharing your story and for changing the culture and awakening and stirring the pot.
I'm not sure I've done it, but I'm really happy. I'm going to stay in there. I'm going to keep being who I am. I have no other choice.
It's a process. It's a life flow. It's what we're called to do.
Thanks, Tej.
That's it. That's for my mom.
Awesome. That was great.